This is The Neutral Position, hosted by Nick Palmisciano, bringing honesty and reason back into conversation. Here's your host, Nick Palmisciano.
Hey guys, I'm Nick Palmisciano, and this is The Neutral Position. Today we have Mike Macchiavello, wrestler extraordinaire, actor, lover, fighter. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I guess I'll just start with, I was born in North Carolina.
It's a great state.
Great, favorite state by far. And then was born outside of the Charlotte area. I've lived in Raleigh since 2013, and then been competing at the Olympic level since 2018, and now just kind of going to finish up this Olympic cycle and transition to the next thing, whether that's fighting or coaching or who knows, you know. So, but yeah, I'm excited for kind of to close up this chapter of my life and get ready for the next thing. But yeah, that's where I'll start.
So, you know, we ask all guests, you know, what do you want to talk about? And I was expecting you to tell me that you wanted to talk about wrestling and, you know, fighting and the stuff that, you know, and you were like, you know, the duality of man, you know, like, is truth a real thing anymore, or is it all subjective? And, you know, China and U.S. relations, which I'm game for. But before we do that, I think we have to at least start talking about wrestling.
Yeah, let's do it.
How'd you get into wrestling?
So I actually didn't want to wrestle. I had a football coach.
Was it the singlets?
It was the singlets. I was like, I ain't wearing them things. You got this leotard-looking thing that's real tight to your body. You're in a gym with a bunch of guys, and it's just kind of like, I'm going to stick with football, you know? So I was a football player and a soccer player first, and then I remember I had a football coach kind of suggest to me, hey, you should try out for wrestling. I think you'd do really well. I'm like, no, I'm all right. And I remember it was 8th grade football season, and it was kind of nearing towards the end. And I had a teammate who was from Pennsylvania, which obviously Pennsylvania is a hotbed for wrestling. They have a deep, rich culture of wrestling. And his father was one of our football coaches, and the middle school wrestling coach had come out to talk to them to kind of get them ready. And I think it came out to recruit, and they were basically trying to get me to come out for the team. And I was just like, I'm not wearing a singlet. Like, I don't want to wrestle. That was my big holdup.
So it really was the singlet. I was joking, but
it genuinely was the singlet.
So, I mean, I've coached kids of all ages, and the singlet is an issue for some kids. Like, it wasn't for me at all. Like, I'm like, you know, hey, can we get some glitter on this thing? But for some people, it's like, I don't want to be in Lycra, which I frankly don't understand.
So for me, basically, they let me wrestle my first match in shorts and a t-shirt.
Okay.
So they're like, all right, you can wrestle and you don't have to wear a singlet. I was like, really? They're like, yeah. So then I wore a white t-shirt with some black shorts just tucked in with my headgear. I was the only kid in the entire gym that did that, and I felt like the noob kind of. You know, it's like, wow, this guy definitely doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, maybe the singlet's not that bad. So my first match I wrestled.
So back then, though, like, were you, I mean, right now you look like the Batman costume, but back then, were you like a chunky kid and that's why you didn't want to put it on?
I was like probably chunky until like 6th grade, but then 8th grade, I was pretty like cut.
You start, because being cut in 8th grade is normal.
I don't know what to tell you. A lot of chocolate milk and running around.
I looked like a potato in 8th grade. I was like, hey, look, is that a potato? No,
that was the majority of the kids that actually wrestled.
That's my son, Nick.
Nice.
You know? Yeah.
But I wrestled 160, 152 in 8th grade. So I was like,
are you kidding?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I was decent size. And so a lot of the kids in 8th grade that were around that weight just weren't as physically mature yet.
Yep.
So I always joke around saying I was wrestling a lot of marshmallows. You know what I mean? And so
are you like body slamming small children? Is that what we're looking at? Are you like pressing small children over your head and just like looking at their moms and then just driving them into the ground? Like,
I wouldn't say that's exactly what it was, but it was definitely easier than you would think it would be for a first-year wrestler. I didn't lose a match that year.
You didn't lose a match in your first year?
No.
Damn.
Yeah.
Do you know how bad I was at wrestling? I was so bad, man.
But it's also, you got to remember, it's North Carolina. If I was in PA, I probably would have had more losses than I had wins.
PA's tough, man.
Yeah,
PA's
it's a
tough.
different
I remember
ballgame.
the first time I wrestled in Pennsylvania. It was after my sophomore year, and I went out there for a freestyle tournament, and I was pretty good by then. You know, like
Yeah.
I lost a few matches that season, but I was pretty good. I went out there, and like the kid I was wrestling looked like nothing. You know, he looked just like average.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm gonna smoke this kid. Oh my God.
Been there before.
Like it did not. I mean, I think I lost 6-4 or something to a kid that looked like, and it was just like I had no sense that was even possible. They all can wrestle.
Yeah.
Like a fish in Pennsylvania is a good wrestler.
Oh, 100%.
Has been wrestling since, you know, he was 8 or something. You know, it's
I was actually having this conversation with NC State's current heavyweight starter yesterday, because he's from South Carolina, but he transferred to Wyoming Seminary, which is a prep school up in PA, which is really, really good. I mean, they have top recruits come out of there all the time. And he was originally from Pennsylvania before he moved to South Carolina. And he said when he was in PA, I think he moved to South Carolina when he was like 10 or 12 or something like that. He was average, wasn't really that much of a standout, but he said when he came down to South Carolina, he started winning a lot. It was just like, it just gave me a lot of confidence, and I just wanted to do wrestling more because I was like, oh, winning's kind of fun. But in PA, he wasn't winning that much. And as soon as he moved down to South Carolina, his confidence just shot through the roof, and he was just like, I don't know if I would have been or developed the way I had in high school without going down there and just getting the confidence that I did from wrestling competition that necessarily wasn't as deep. And then now we got a top 10 win last Friday when they wrestled Pitt. And he's doing really, really well. He can definitely podium this year. So, like, there's a big difference, you know, between PA and especially states in the Southeast.
What's the first time you lost?
Yeah, freshman year of high school. I took plenty of losses that year. And then I almost tried to quit because I hated cutting weight, and I just wanted to play football.
Yep.
And then my coach was like, "You're not quitting." I was like, "All right, I'm not quitting." So,
do you remember what was it like to lose for the first time?
I don't know if it was. I remember losing more my freshman year. I remember my losses more my freshman year of college more than my freshman year of high school. High school was just kind of me trying out this sport, just kind of something new, something I enjoyed that they told me was going to help make me a better football player, just make me more physical, hit harder. And so, but I never really took losses that poorly. I never was the type of person that was just gonna take a L and then beat myself up about it. It was very much like if I lost, it would just kind of fuel me positively into the direction that was gonna help find a solution or just like make me go harder until I figured out how to get the win. So
that's good.
Yeah, I just always responded well for the most part, which I think is kind of what helped me in my college career.
Where do you think that comes from? I wasn't that way. My kids are that way. Like my kids will have a knockout, drag out.
Yeah.
Especially my daughter. My daughter will be like best friends with the girl before the match. Then they kill each other. I mean, they literally kill each other.
Yeah.
And then after they're hugging and joking and taking selfies. Whereas like I have dudes that I wrestled like 5 times throughout my high school career.
Yeah.
We didn't speak a single time, even though we knew everything about each other's wrestling. And like maybe the only words that I ever said were after we were both graduating, we're like, hey, good luck. And that's it.
Yeah.
But like those losses were visceral. Like they hurt me in a bad way.
Yeah.
But like you're cool with it. Not cool with it. Because I've seen you a couple times lose. You know, it's not often, but I've seen it, and you know, it's not like you want to chat about it or anything,
right?
But you deal with it differently. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it's just how I was raised. Mainly, probably more so my mom having literally no clue what's going on. So I never really had like the crazy parent that was just kind of cared so much about athletics, where performance was a problem whether you won or you lost. So. I could take my mom to a football game and she'd be asking what's going on. I could explain it to her 5 times, and we go to a football game the next Friday, and she's going to ask me, so is that a touchdown or is that a home run or what is that? I'm like, Mom, we had this conversation like 20 times, you know? So she's just completely oblivious. She's just so supportive, and I think that support just very much kind of set me up in a way and kind of helped me perceive failure and loss as like not that big of a deal. And so I'd walk off a mat, maybe I took a L, and she'd be like, "I'm so proud of you, Mijo." And I'm like, "You did a good job."
Yeah.
I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what are you talking about? Did you not? She had no clue.
Yeah.
Absolutely no clue.
But
and so
my parents were the same way, but I was still a freak. You know, I was still like,
I don't know. I think that's the norm. I think people get upset. Don't get me wrong. There's times where I haven't responded well to a loss. Like I think about my freshman year of college, I lost 2 wrestle-offs in a row. And I remember storming out of the gym, like kicking the door open, just livid, sitting outside, trying to figure out why, because I'm working my ass off, and I ended up losing 2 matches in a row. I was gifted another opportunity to redeem myself, and then I lost that one right after. And so it was just kind of really, I think, almost frustrating when you work hard, and you expect to see the result.
Yeah.
You don't see the result. You continue to work hard, and then there's still no change in the result.
Yep.
And that can be really devastating in a way. And I think what I've noticed is I've seen kids go through that same experience, except when you don't have the ability to remain positive or remain optimistic, you waver or you settle or you change whatever goal you initially had to become more attainable. And so for me, I just kind of, thankfully I never settled. I think I just had good support system, and then also just very determined and yeah. But I think it varies kid to kid.
In general, that putting the work in consistently brings a result, even if you don't realize it at first. Right now, I'm coaching middle school. I kind of follow my kids around and kind of help the community wherever they need. So right now, like this last year, I spent most of my time coaching middle school, a little time coaching high school. And this year, for the first time, we had 7 girls on the team. So like women's wrestling is really starting to pick up, fastest growing sport in the country. And one of the girls who really has she went from being a kid that had never done any sport to being like a really functional wrestler. Like she's not elite or anything, but like she knows the moves. And at the end of the season, she was like, I worked really hard and I just don't think I'm good. And I don't know if I should keep doing this. And I was like, did you have fun? It's like, yeah, I had fun, but I got beat. It's like, listen, you can't see it because you're in it. But from my perspective, you've probably improved more than anyone else on the team this year.
Yeah.
And if you give it, you're in 6th grade. If you give this time, you're going to be murdering people in 2 years, which you probably shouldn't say to kids. But she got the biggest smile on her face. And I think that so often people, like you said, people have these goals and the expectation, and I don't know if it's because of social media. I don't know if people are just not used to grinding. And I hate using grinding because it's such a like
overused
influencer term.
Yeah.
But my first company, and I've told this story a few times, but my first company, it did not feel like progress for a long time. I mean, I was almost bankrupt. Like it was bad.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it wasn't. And it's not like I did anything significantly different when it started working. It was just a matter of like iterating. And all of those little decisions, kind of put seeds out there, and it eventually starts working, and I have to think it's similar to your wrestling career. I have to think it's similar, really to just about any success story I've seen. Like it doesn't come overnight. So talk a little bit about maybe times where you felt, maybe things aren't going exactly the way I want, and how, you turn that around. Because I'll talk about wrestling all day, but not everyone watching is a wrestler. So they might not appreciate the sport, but.
Yeah, so I agree with you, man. I think some people, and maybe the younger demographic coming up now might think like, okay, overnight success. And me personally, just from my experience, and then obviously getting to know people like yourself and other friends that we have who are successful. I mean, just the stories that I've gotten here, it's never overnight, man. Mm-hmm. Whatever looks like an overnight success
never is.
Had years and years of just work behind it. And so I think about my college career, right? I was an NCAA champion my last year of college, and I redshirted, so that was 5 years.
Yep.
For freshman year and sophomore year, my total record combined was 24 wins, 27 losses. So I was under 500 with my first 2 years combined. Freshman year, I got the starting spot. Sophomore year, I lost the starting spot to an underclassman who was a freshman. Shout out to my guy, Nick Hall. He's the one who beat me in the wrestle-off, and he's in the military now.
That was probably important for you, though.
Huge, man, huge. I think that was a career-defining moment for me because the way I viewed the situation was very much either I have to improve or I'll never get the opportunity to start and wrestle for this program again because we're at the same weight class. Mm-hmm. And he's a year younger than me. Yep. So he ended up changing weight classes, actually. He went down to 74, and then I ended up going up to 197 by the time I was a senior. But just that experience in itself put me in a place mentally where it's either you succeed or you fail. There's no in between. There's no gray area. You either figure out how to get good enough to become the starter or you never start ever again. And that's just kind of how I viewed the situation. So it just kind of drove me and fueled me in a way where I started exhausting every possible resources that was at my disposal at NC State. So we had a sports psychologist that was in the department for all athletes. And I was never the type of guy that was like, all right, well, let me go see the sports psych because I feel like I need a sports psych. I never felt like that type of person. I always felt like, okay, you know what, pretty independent. I'll figure it out myself. But then I thought about it. I said, if I don't accomplish my goal, 20 years from now, will I look back and wonder,
should I have gone?
Should I have gone? What kind of difference could that have made? Mm-hmm. And I would just have been curious. And so I decided to start meeting with our sports psych. Her name is Michelle Joshua. She's incredible, absolute beast when it comes to sports performance and just a great person. So I ended up meeting with her for the next 4 years, and just that resource, all the people in the training room in terms of like athletic trainers and sports medical staff, coaches, just across the board, I started exhausting every resource that was at my disposal and trying to get the most out of everything that was there. And I slowly started to see things kind of progress. And then the following year, I redshirted, had an opportunity they asked me to move up to 197 my third year. And I remember telling them, I was like, I feel like I'm a team first kind of guy. And I feel like this is a moment in my career where I need to be selfish, and I feel like redshirting is going to be more in my best interest. And they're like, all right, well, we'll give you a day to think about it. Come back to us tomorrow. I was like, all right. So I came back tomorrow. I decided to put team first. I said, you know, whatever you guys need me to do, I'll do. And they said, we talked about it as a staff. We're going to let you redshirt. I think that was one of the best things I could have done for my career developmentally, just because I was green when I came into college. Coming from North Carolina, never wrestling year-round, didn't wrestle for a club, played football, wrestled, and then I played soccer for a travel team.
Were you the first North Carolina homegrown national champ?
Second.
Who did it before you?
Tab Thacker in '84. So
figured you would know.
Yeah. So Tab also was a North Carolina native, and he wrestled also at NC State too. And so he was a national champ. So it's cool that the two North Carolina natives to win NCAA titles both wrestled for NC State.
Super cool.
And so Tab in '84, and then myself in 2018.
I wanted to talk about pancreation, but okay.
What's that?
It's an ancient Greek form of wrestling. One of my favorite wrestlers, he literally tactfully bit people's fingers and broke them so that they couldn't win the match, and he won 2 Olympic medals off of that.
Oh my
He's
gosh.
Leon Tiskus.
The old Olympics.
The old Olympics, where that was legal, and they even had moves to make sure that you couldn't grab a guy's nutsack because it was totally legal to do that. So they actually developed this act there for that.
That's crazy.
It's nuts.
We're getting all this, right?
But yeah, so oh man. Yeah, I don't know how I switch back. So, just to keep finishing what I was saying, basically, long story short, I didn't see any actual results on paper until my 5th year. But those 4 years leading up to that, my goal was to win a national title each year. Didn't even qualify for the tournament as a freshman. Sophomore year, didn't even get the starting spot. Junior year, redshirt junior year, round of 12, didn't even All-American. And then the following year, ended up winning the whole tournament. And so the lesson that taught me, and that resonates the most with me, is just keep working incredibly hard regardless of whatever results you see. And if you have patience with yourself and you remain optimistic and you stay positive, eventually, inevitably, you will see a change in the result. But you won't if you start to waver, if you start to get really negative, and if you start to just kind of settle. And so my encouragement to a lot of kids when I go teach a clinic, or just to people who ask me like about my career or just what they can do to get better, is just stay diligent, stay persistent, keep working, and don't worry about the result. It's not about the result.
Yep.
That was the biggest lesson I learned when I was in college. Because when I was a freshman, all I cared about was the result. Win, 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 win. But when my mindset shifted to having a process-oriented outcome instead of result-oriented focus, like, the result started taking care of itself. You get so focused on the end goal, and to me that takes away mental focus, it takes away energy, and it can be distracting sometimes. Let that take care of itself. Put all your energy into what you're doing at the moment and do that as best as you possibly can. And let things take care of themselves. And so that's what my encouragement usually is to people, is stop worrying about the result and just focus on the process. And it sounds so cliche, but I mean, it's true though.
Yep. So, I want to actually bring up a conversation we recently had. There is a societal kind of, structure that has been set up that people almost mechanically follow. And that structure is like, you go to high school, you do well, then you get into the best college you can, you go to college, then you try to get the best corporate gig you can, you get that job, you get married, your life is essentially mapped out from beginning to death. What a happy life in America is supposed to look like. And I think it messes a lot of people up because, I know I felt this a little bit when I was in my 20s, especially when I was starting my first company, Ranger Up. You look around and there is a perception that other people are advancing faster than you.
I feel like that right now.
But so the interesting thing, and I'm going to get to that in a sec. But there is an impression that people are advancing faster than you and that you're falling behind and that life is passing you by and that you should be doing something else. It's a very common thing with people in their 20s and even in their 30s. But the thing is that most people look at you and what you're doing is unattainable, regardless of whether they were a wrestler, right? You're a professional athlete. You are competing with Olympians. You are chasing a dream. You are physically fit. You're meeting with and training with UFC fighters, WWE athletes, the best wrestlers on planet Earth. They're looking at you as, man, like that would be amazing. But at the same time, and I don't mean to, betray private conversations, but you said it was all right.
Yeah.
Like you and I recently had a conversation where you were like, I think I'm falling behind. And it's almost hard for me not to chuckle because it's like, what is it that you want? Because I've lived a weird life. I don't ever look back and say, let me tell you about my time as a manager of business development at John Deere. It was a great job. I worked on a multi-billion-dollar deal. You know, it didn't close, but you know, I worked on it.
Yeah.
And I don't think about that. Like, I don't tell that story because there was nothing about that moment that was meaningful, impactful, scary. All the scary stuff happens in things that maybe people working those jobs or maybe people that look at what a perfect life is supposed to be would never do. And like, you're living that life right now. And it's exciting and frustrating and scary, but it's interesting. So
it definitely is. Yeah.
So I want you to talk a little bit about like your honest feelings about what is it like to be a 28-year-old
right.
that is you're a very smart guy. You have aspirations to do things in business. You have aspirations to do things in acting. But you still are fixated on this goal, and you're worried that the goal is keeping you from future aspirations. Talk about that. Talk about that feeling.
Yeah. So, I had a couple opportunities with some organizations, right? Like,
Can we say the
yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know. So WWE, I did a tryout and they offered me a contract opportunity, and then I had a Bellator developmental contract on the table also. And then obviously I have my Olympic aspirations, preparing for Olympic trials next April. Lord willing, make the team, go to the Olympic Games, represent the United States, and do the best I could possibly do, which is hopefully an Olympic gold medal. But it's a daunting task, especially for someone at my weight class, where you have two world champions. Mm-hmm. One who's a 2-time world champion, and then you have another one who's a 3-time world champion, an Olympic gold medalist, Olympic silver medalist. And then,
quick question: who do you think's better at wrestling, them or me?
Can you use weapons? If you had a bat, I would give it to you.
I don't even think I could do it with a bat, man. Those guys are good. How many limbs would Kyle Snyder have to lose before I can beat him in wrestling? What do you think?
At least both of his arms.
See, I'd rather him lose the legs. I feel like
Really?
I feel like if he has no legs, I can take him.
He's gonna grab you.
I know.
Even if he has no legs. And then you got to deal with him on your leg.
I'm like, get off of me.
And if you got no legs, you know how easy it is to just roll around?
That's true. That's true.
Just good luck keeping him on his back. You know what I'm saying? So
you think I'm better off with no arms?
Better off with no arms.
I don't know, man.
Because then it's just all head position that he has to kind of defend with, and you can just snap him down, maybe get a go behind.
Yeah, just run away the rest of the match.
Right, but if he's got his arms, I mean,
yeah,
he's kind of.
That hurts, man.
I think that's more of a problem.
You don't even think I can take him?
I think majority of people would need him to have no arms to score a takedown on him. But yeah, basically, it's just a daunting task, man. And I had to ask myself a question realistically: do I believe that this is even realistic? Do I believe that this is possible if I'm going to forego or postpone these opportunities, and because they may not be there a year from now, those are serious questions you got to ask yourself.
Sure.
And for me, it's not like wrestling is the highest paid job in the world. You know what I mean? So, and that's one thing, I have my own independent, like, financial aspirations and goals and things that I want to do as well. But the way I kind of went about making the decision was, you're in the physical prime of your life as a male, and that only lasts so long.
Yep.
Right? And so for me, I want to be able to look back on this specific time of my life and be able to look in the mirror and say, okay, I did everything I possibly could to be my best. And I also am just curious to see what that looks like, right? You kind of talked about MMA guys back in the day when the sport wasn't the biggest.
Yep.
They just wanted to know the answer.
They just wanted the answer. Who's the toughest?
They just wanted the answer. And that's what I want. I just want to know the answer. I want to know that, and so that was kind of how I went about making my decision. And so now it kind of feels like, they have the saying, you burn the ships, storm the castle. Well, the ships are burned now, right? All the eggs are in one basket. So I'm all in now. And so there's no looking back, regardless of whether you think it's the right decision or whether you don't think it's the right decision. You're only going to know years later on down the road. And so,
well, no, I see. I actually look at it totally different. I think you're wrong. I think you made the right decision. I think it doesn't matter what the outcome is.
Yeah.
Like, you made the right decision, because once you commit to a decision, it's the right decision. It's done.
Yeah.
You know, WWE contract 1 offer is the past.
Yeah.
So this is now the decision.
Yeah.
And our conversation on the phone, you asked a very specific question, which a lot of people encounter in their lives. And that was, if I don't say yes to this WWE contract, it might never be there.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember what I said, but basically, I've never been in a situation where I do remember what you said. Forced into something or threatened with something where it was the right decision.
And I wouldn't necessarily say it was a threat or forced. I think it was just the circumstances and whatever. The company operates solely from a business perspective. It's never a personal thing.
Of course not.
I don't disagree with you, though. You know what I mean? And so,
but what's the worst thing that happens?
Right.
You don't do the WWE.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. There's plenty of other opportunities.
Is that the end of the options in life?
It's not. Of course not. Right.
Do you have a huge network of really successful, talented people because of the sport?
Yep.
Do you know what hard work is on a level that no one else understands because of this sport?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, like, okay. Like, that's the gift. Everything else is like, whatever.
Yeah. I think one thing, too, that I'm excited about is there is, like, what you said, right? You mentioned the word interesting to describe, like, certain life decisions. Mm-hmm. And this is very interesting. Like, this is, it's scary, but it makes you feel something. And there's also a certain excitement about it as well. Knowing that there's nothing guaranteed, but you have the opportunity to make something special happen.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm kind of really excited about this next year and a half, next chapter, because, I have the opportunity to do something really great. And it's not something that everybody gets the chance to do. And so one, I'm just thankful too, but then the other part is like, let's get to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, we're going to switch gears because otherwise we'll talk about wrestling the whole time.
Right.
You wanted to talk a little bit about, the United States as the world hegemon. And whether that is going to continue.
I really wanted to pick your brain on this, to be honest.
I mean, like, hey, you brought up the topic. You're supposed to be the expert on this, I'm
hoping you're more of the expert and I'm just asking questions, learning.
So, the specific thing that you wanted to talk about is, we're starting to get pushed.
For sure.
By China, by Russia.
Yep.
Talk about your concerns. Like, what keeps you up at night?
I don't know if it keeps me up at night. I think I sleep pretty well, but.
You're the worst guest I've ever had.
I'm sorry. I'll take that back. Yeah, so honestly, the thing that keeps me up at night is, nah, I'm just playing. But I would say the biggest thing that worries me right now when it comes to foreign affairs is that I think China's economy is growing. I think you start to see I just think with the whole COVID thing, I think the things that we have coming up with the next presidential election, I think things that you see between Ukraine and Russia, I think there's just a lot going on, and it's just kind of hard to really know what's going to happen next. But I think one thing that I genuinely get concerned about is it doesn't matter what's happening domestically in the U.S., China is 100% going to be trying to vie for like a world leading power. So like, what does that look like, right? Because if you're gonna try and do that, you're gonna have to contest for the top spot. And when you do that, it's not like, regardless of what's happening domestically, whether it's positive or negative for the U.S., the U.S. isn't just going to be like, well, here you go, China, go ahead and start, influencing the world the way you want it to be influenced. And so, yeah, man, just like genuine concerns of like potential like war, whether it's in the next decade. And I think there's different types of war, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily like, oh, it's going to be a firefight and people are shooting at each other or bombs, but I think there's just going to slowly be things that start to happen that kind of egg one country on that are just going to start kind of frustrating things to a point where eventually one country is going to reach a breaking point where they're going to start to take serious action, whatever that looks like. Because right now, I think it's very much just like testing the waters, right? I think there's things that each country is doing that's testing the waters, and so.
Well, there's a few big differences. The first difference is that China is taking a 100 years approach to conquering the world. America, our policy changes every 4 years.
Right.
And, I obviously favor, the U.S. constitutional democracy, the constitutional republic,
100%.
The constitutional republic that is the United States is the best form of government we've seen yet. That being said, all forms of government have challenges. The biggest challenge that we have is we do not stick to a plan. There isn't a plan to succeed. So with China, for example, they have been buying up ports in Africa for a generation. What I mean by that is they essentially come in and say, hey, I know you need a port here. We'll build it, and you pay us back over this period of time. But they know that they're not going to be able to keep up with those terms, and at some point, they essentially own the port. So what they're doing in Africa is, as Africa becomes, increasingly a first world power, and Africa's growing at an incredible rate.
Tremendously. Yeah.
China's going to control the economic condition of Africa. All of the trade will go through China, right? And then the other problem with the American system is it only works when the citizens are patriots. And I don't mean that like rah-rah waving the flag.
Right.
And, people have kind of bent the word patriot to mean a certain thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a certain political party or a certain anything. But if I'm the CEO of a multinational firm and I can either build in an American factory and employ American workers, or I can save $3 per widget and do it in China, well, I am making the decision to do it in China. And I'm doing that over and over and over again, to the point where, if you remember during COVID, we had to ask China to send us masks because we don't produce masks. We had to ask China to send us drugs because we manufacture all of our drugs in Chinese facilities. At any point, China could just say, screw you guys. And there would be an 18-month period of time before we could get a lot of things that we depend on. China has bought up a lot of farmland in America.
Yep. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So
what do you think about that?
I think that we have unfettered capitalism and a lack of patriots in the ruling class. And I think it's a problem. I don't have an easy solution for you. Yeah. That being said, I do think there should be a certain number of industries where we at least have a bare minimum that is created here. And you do that through tax incentives or whatever, but right. Critical drugs, fuel. Basically, we should always be thinking, if the world shut us off, can we exist? And if the answer is no, then we need to solve that problem.
Yep.
What does unfettering capitalism in the ruling class mean?
That's a good question, Hollywood. For those of you that don't know Hollywood, he is the ultimate producer of this show. So unfettered capitalism. What I mean by that is, if you're in a small business, like I've had potential clients come to me and ask me to do things that I thought were just immoral. Their product is immoral, their message is immoral. And I just say no, because to me personally, it's more important to feel good about myself when I go to bed than it is to make more money. Well, the people that tend to rise to the top of mega corporations are incentivized entirely to make money. You know, they are reporting to shareholders. They are graded every quarter. Their jobs hang in the balance. Their reputation hangs in the balance. It's not a small decision in an office in Durham. It is a public decision. And they get asked the question, why aren't you saving $3 a widget in China? And when they answer, well, I want to protect American workers, they're told this is a multinational corporation and you have to, do what's in the best
interest of the company, its growth.
That's right.
Its profit margins. Yeah.
And, why has China been able to do some things that we can't? I mean, your answer is because we play by certain rules and they don't. If you do business in China, they have to own 50% of the company. If you're an American corporation in China, you think they don't have spies stealing all of your IP? Of course they do. China doesn't create IP, they steal it. That being said, so that's the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But China's GDP is not anywhere near ours, like on an individual basis.
Yeah. We currently are the largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
But even if their economy were to surpass us, their GDP is actually shrinking per person in a lot of areas.
Because of the one-child policy?
No, just because, that's an issue. That was an issue. It's gone now. A lot of people don't realize it's gone now because now they have a population crisis.
Right.
And we're going to have one too, but not on the level that they are.
Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting though, when you think about that, obviously that's super important in terms of like economic growth. You need people who can work the jobs and mass produce because they have so many factories and whatever. But one thing that I think is interesting is that with the one-child policy, even though it created a lot of victims and it wasn't necessarily like morally just.
That was terrible.
Terrible. Absolutely
literally
terrible thing.
Murdered.
People fined, exactly.
Babies were born and then killed. It was terrible.
Horrendous.
Yeah.
I think on the back end, when you are, and this is just me trying to put myself in someone's shoes. I have no idea, and I can't even begin to imagine. But let's say you're only allowed to have one child. When you get the opportunity to have a child, and you are gifted with the ability to actually conceive a child and give birth to a healthy child, think about how much you cherish that child.
Sure.
Right? How much love, support, and investment into that child you are going to give, knowing that this is going to be your only one, right?
Yeah.
And then think about the investment back that the child's going to give and how the parents and the grandparents invest in the child, but also vice versa. The child is committed to his parents and his grandparents, and what type of family structure that creates and what that does for the individual.
Yeah.
And when you have this massive amount of people in this entire generation that's come up with a tremendous amount of love and support and guidance and direction. I mean, just as well as I do how important a strong family structure is to raising a child and
it's the most important
and
thing.
what kind of child that produces, right? So it's like they're going to be very, very competent, hardworking citizens who are going to contribute in a lot of different ways. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think about just like the family structure in the U.S. and how that's changed drastically from, obviously it's evolving and values are changing, but the traditional values of just the family, I think, have changed some in the U.S. and it's not emphasized or prioritized as much as it used to be. And I think getting away with that is part of what's a concern because what type of children we're raising makes a massive difference. And the one-child policy, horrendous, and it creates a population issue. But those children are cherished the entire time. So I want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I do think they're separate things, right?
For sure.
So it comes down to what parents prioritize.
Yeah.
But
I feel like the policies kind of force that in China.
Well, sure.
Unintentionally.
Yeah,
right?
sure,
Like,
they do. But also, most, when we think of the old world, whether we're talking about, China, Japan, Europe, or whatever, there is a strong nuclear family structure.
Yep.
And the nuclear family, I mean, there's so much data on this. And obviously, people always throw out the exceptions, like what if the guy's abusive? What if, those situations, obviously it's better to not have a nuclear family if somebody in the arrangement is a total.
It's never just black and white.
Yeah, if somebody's an asshole, obviously it's better to not have an asshole in the unit.
Peace.
That being said,
the
nuclear family is the biggest advantage that a kid can have.
For sure.
And, all of the data bears that out. In fact, I talked about this on another episode. A recent Harvard-Yale study came out and basically looked at families where there's a married nuclear family, or not even married. It didn't have anything to do with married. It was just, is there a man and woman in the household consistently, over the course of at least, I think it was like 15 years or something of the kid's life. Is there single moms and single dads, right? And the data bore out that kids that don't have dads actively involved in their lives have all kinds of challenges, whether it's lack of security, poverty, anxiety, a host of issues. And the data actually showed that if the issues associated with poverty, obesity, anxiety, success bore out that if you did not have a dad involved, you were 25 to 33% less likely to succeed in all of those areas. Whereas if it was a single dad versus a married couple, the numbers were almost identical. And so we've had a period of time where we have deprioritized the value of having a male figure in the family. It does not have to be the biological father, but there needs to be a father in the equation to ensure success. And it's not because moms aren't doing good jobs or they don't care or whatever. This is biological. There is a biological need to feel secure. There is a biological need to feel loved. And different parents provide different things. And so I think that we have a very selfish society right now, whereas I don't think that the 60s was good, where you had women that just had to deal with assholes. I don't think that is the answer. But I do think that the idea that we were talking about before, where people feel like they're falling behind, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I've got a good job now. I've graduated college. I'm dating this girl or I'm dating this boy. I have to get married. And they're not really thinking about the quality of that person's character. They're not thinking about, do we have the same goals? It's very, I feel this, but, and that's super important. But really long term, you guys have to be pulling in the same direction. And I don't think people talk about that because it's not romantic.
Yeah, it's reality.
It's reality.
Right.
But, if one of you wants to take wild risks and go for it and be an entrepreneur or be an influencer or whatever your thing is, and the other one wants to 9 to 5 it, that's going to be a problem. If one of you is very public and the other one is very private, that's going to be a problem. If one of you really wants to devote time to parenting and the other doesn't, unless there's an arrangement where, hey, you're going to go out and work and I'm going to take care of the kid, whichever way that goes, that's going to be a problem. And people people don't have those conversations. They like the single person that they're dating a lot. They have a good relationship. They get married, and then it's like life comes, and divorce is easy.
Highest it's ever been.
Highest it's ever been.
Highest it's ever been.
And divorce itself isn't the problem, but you've got dads or moms that after divorce are either using the kid as a battering ram to hurt the other person,
Collateral.
or they just flee,
Right.
whichever one.
And more often than not, I feel like it's the first one, the collateral.
Yeah.
The child becomes collateral damage.
So you get kids with anxiety, you get kids with lack of security, you get kids that don't have confidence. So, does that happen in the old world as much as it happens in America? I don't think so. And it is a problem. And it reflects in so many of the issues that we have.
Yeah. And that was kind of what I wanted to kind of get to when I mentioned like this China versus US.
Yeah.
Obviously you can talk about all the foreign policy, all the technical stuff, but I feel like it stems from somewhere, right? And so I feel like that's part of one of the biggest issues that we have right now domestically. And so how do you evolve in a way that starts to become more of a solution to that problem? You know what I mean? And then does that help us start progressing in the right direction to where we remain as the world's leading power? Because everybody wants to talk about the domestic issues between all the moral rights, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. But at the end of the day, it's like we're all U.S. citizens. Mm-hmm. We all live in the same country.
Yeah.
And when the U.S. is no longer the world leading power,
it's not going to be good.
And there's another country that's influencing the entire world.
Yep.
All that other stuff all of a sudden becomes less relevant.
It's not important anymore.
It's not important anymore.
Yep.
And so I think people need to refocus and understand like what really matters. And I feel like right now what's going on internationally is what ultimately matters. And I feel like if we can figure out how to come together a little bit more by thinking with a much more like broader perspective, it kind of just helps align things a little bit more, because everybody wants to talk about these little tiny minuscule problems that mean absolutely nothing when it comes to the global economy and what's happening internationally. It's like, all right, well, when we're in fucking last place and getting our asses kicked, like you're not going to care about this as much.
Yeah.
So I think it's just interesting to think about. And I don't think enough people are educated enough on all that stuff, and they don't even realize like what's really going on.
Well, I'm actually optimistic about your generation, which I know is not the thing that you're supposed to say, because the cool thing to say is that, your generation and the kids in high school right now suck. That's what everybody, they're weak and this and that. I don't think that's true. I actually think that that your generation is very thoughtful, and I think very decent. And when people talk about, listen.
No, I'll take it. Yeah.
Listen, when people like to ascribe to, kind of tweeners and people in their 20s now, that the generation is woke, whatever that means. And like to me,
Don't get me started on that and cancel culture and the whole people can't make mistakes anymore, man.
Yeah. Well, I was actually talking about this with Jennifer Griffin from Fox. She was on our very first show. But, her concern is about her kids and, what if they make a mistake? What if they get drunk at a party and do something stupid? I think your generation doesn't care. I think what's going to happen is that when you're in your 40s and they pull up the image of, Mike Macchiavello is, he's wearing lingerie at a party, whatever they have on you. I think
not that.
I think, I'm just fishing. I just think that you're going to be like, man. Yeah, I was 20. I was drunk at a party. So what? Yeah. And I think most people in your generation are going to be that way because your whole life is captured, and things that you thought were brilliant and smart that you posted on Facebook when you were 16, you now realize are stupid, but the internet is forever. And I just think, I think your generation grew up in it, and you're not going to be as Karen-ish as my generation. Like, I honestly, when I see these people that are like, hey, this dude 15 years ago said this, do you not remember like the 80s, you know, like the things that people said, the way people acted, you know? I mean, it's like, it's wild to me, but no one has that on them because no one had phones.
Right.
There were no cell phone. If you had a cell phone, it was in a suitcase and you were rich. It was like, oh my God, that guy's got a cell phone. Like, you know, like it's still attached to a cord, you know, into the box. I mean, it is a different time. So none of that existed. I am generally optimistic about the next generation. I think you guys will figure things out. And my generation is also still just kind of coming into power, so to speak. Most decisions are still made by 70, 80-year-olds. And I think my generation straddled the line between the old world and the new world. Like we grew up without computers and then learned how to actually program in computers because that's the only way you could use a computer. And now we have iPhones. I'm optimistic. I could be
No,
overly
that's good to hear.
optimistic.
Yeah, no.
But I think we're going to rally.
Nice.
I think we're going to rally.
That's
All right. The last thing that you wanted to talk about is whether truth is now subjective.
Right.
So, like, let's start with your thoughts on that.
Oh boy.
You're supposed to know about the things that you want to talk about.
I just wanted to say things that I think would provoke interesting conversation, to be honest. I really didn't give this as much thought as I should have probably, but let me,
Here's some life advice. Approach everything the way you approach your wrestling career.
So wing it. No, I'm just kidding. Plan nothing. No.
I'll start so you can think. All right.
Well, yep.
Chat GPT.
Oh yeah. The
Right?
AI. Yep.
The AI is essentially able to mimic human reaction at this point. And it's only getting better. This is only the 3rd generation. 5th generation's coming out soon. These guys sitting around you, including Tom Aurelius Hunt over there, have been making AI art, which it's not perfect, but it's pretty wild that you can just basically ask this thing to do something and it creates something. You can now, with very high-end programs, provide like a movie that someone has actually acted in and say, I need you to make this PG-13. And they will take out the F-bombs and replace them with freaking and change the mouth so that it says freaking instead of
I think I
fucking.
did see that.
Yes.
A clip of that.
So
And actually, I sent it to my buddy Jacob Casper, who's Julius Creed now.
Julius Creed
in
the
WWE. He's going to be huge. He's crushing it.
He's a character.
He's
that
a man.
dude's a character.
Shout out my guy Jake. And I sent it to him. He was just like, dude, that's crazy. Like, that's actually insane. And I think one thing that's concerning about that is just, right, like, how do you discern what's real and what's not?
Yeah.
And how dangerous is that?
Yeah. Because it's going to get harder.
Right.
Right now, there's still little ticks that kind of say, this doesn't quite look right. But, the security portion always follows the attack. So when you think about the software on your computer that's keeping viruses out, well, that software is reactive. It's somebody put out a virus, they immediately program something to stop that virus and then load it up. But there's a couple day delta. So for those couple days, people are getting the virus. Well, it's going to be the same thing with this, is how good is the deep fake? If somebody shares a deep fake of, fast forward 10 years and you're now a congressman,
Jeez.
And it's like,
not.
hey, here's a deep fake of Mike.
Hopefully not.
Here's a deep fake of Mike Macchiavello
Yeah.
cheating on his wife.
With those 2 goats.
Man. It just had
Goats?
Hollywood quiet the
Wait,
whole
wasn't
time.
there a Netflix show that did something like this? It was like
The men who talk to 2 goats, or
no, not goats. I think it was.
Can
like
let's
a
move
pig
away
or
from the
something.
goats.
All right.
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's what it was.
that-
Black
yeah.
Mirror.
That's
yeah.
the only episode of Black Mirror I ever watched. And so everyone's like, "Oh, did you watch this?" I'm like, "I was done.
After that
I
first
was
show.
done after the pig episode." I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
"We're
that was
done."
bad.
It was
Yeah.
really bad.
So
It was
they-
really bad.
They did
Perfect
that the first
representation of
time.
America.
With the Ukraine war, that was the first time the Russians tried to use deepfake. They sent out a deepfake of Zelensky saying, "We have to embrace our Russian brothers. They're coming into the country. We got to lay down our arms and work together on this." And it was a deep fake of Zelensky. It was the first time they ever tried it.
So what you have, right?
Oh my gosh.
People want to believe the worst, and they want to retweet, and they want to make commentary, and they want to get followers. And so the deep fake is going to be halfway around the world by the time somebody comes out and says,
Hey, this is fake.
and not only that, but are people even going to believe you?
Kind of like the boy who cried wolf a little bit type thing.
It's just like, you know, if I ran
Right.
against you and I
Right.
want to believe that you're cheating on your wife, and somebody puts out a really good deep fake,
Oh,
there's a very small percentage of the population that's going to be able to truly run that analysis and say this is fake.
right. It's probably going to be only the people who are genuinely close to you and know you well enough.
Well, no, I don't even mean that. I mean, like, technically, like somebody's
Right.
got to run through.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, think about it. There are people that think the world is flat. There are people that no matter how many times you tell them something is untrue, no matter how much evidence you show them, they never change their mind because they don't want to be wrong publicly.
Yeah.
So now there's video. Like, there's video where we believe what we see. We believe what we hear. I'm seeing that you're cheating on your wife, and why would I not believe that? I already don't like you. I already think that you're a bad person. I already think that you're a liar because you don't have my political affiliation. Why would I believe that isn't real?
So do you think that's more emotionally driven, or do you think it's like educationally, like it's people not being able to think critically, or people who aren't taught to think critically for themselves? Or is it just people who think critically for themselves but are emotionally driven to just believe the worst about a specific individual or situation?
I think that we're all fancy monkeys, and that we try very hard to pretend that we're something better, bigger than that.
Yeah.
But we're fancy monkeys. We figured out fire. That allowed us to cook things, which, you know, processes food better, which allowed us to develop brains that take up 25% of the calories that we eat. No other species has that because they don't have fire. That's what happened. We're fancy monkeys. And so we still are ruled by emotion unless we develop mental discipline, which means,
So just
Even-
throw everybody into wrestling.
well,
I'm just kidding.
if I present you with information, even though you know me, you shouldn't believe it. You should think about it. You should assess it.
Right.
You should weigh whether I'm right, because I'm wrong a lot. If I get presented with information, Joe Biden did this, Donald Trump did that, right off the bat, I'm assuming that because it's stated that way, it's at least a partial lie. That is my starting point, because I understand the political world is full of half-truths, poor presentation to make somebody look bad. But if you're all in on whatever the team is, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever your team is, if you're all in on it, you're not objectively looking at most of this stuff. You want it to be true. You are wishing that it's true. You want the bad thing to be there so you can be like, I told you so. My guy was good. Your guy stinks. That's where I worry about deep fakes. That's where I worry about AI. That's where I worry about this whole notion of, you know, my truth. there is only truth. And we both have perceptions, and both of our perceptions are flawed. You know, I can look at this and say, this mug is red. And you can look at it and say, well, I think it's brown. And we're both wrong because this has some Pantone color that dictates exactly what it is. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. That's the truth.
Yeah.
And you and I have our perceptions of what the truth is. And that's true with literally everything. When you start talking about human emotion and, you know, things that affect individuals, how you grew up versus how I grew up, we're going to see something different.
Yeah.
And, you know, a dude that grew up in Soweto, South Africa is going to see it way different, and so forth and so on. But there's still only one truth, and we all have our perception based on all of the variables in our lives.
And that goes, it makes me think of, you know, the saying everybody always says is perception is reality,
Mm-hmm.
but only to a certain extent, right?
Perception is reality for the individual,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that it's true.
Right.
So whenever I am arguing with somebody and we are really, I make sure that I say, my perception is this. Do you think my perception is wrong? As opposed to, this is my truth. Because when you say this is my truth, you're basically saying, I can believe whatever I want.
That irks
and
me so much.
I can believe whatever I want, and it's true. Well, it's no, because if...
And I get the sentiment, like it comes from a very positive place, and I think maybe the psychology behind it or the mental space it puts people in overall is positive and probably healthy for them. But just the saying itself, to me, every time just screams like, truth is subjective. Like, I'm just going to believe whatever I want to believe. When it's like, it's a dangerous thing when you start to do that, right? It's a very dangerous thing when you start to do that, because now there's no foundation or basis to make decisions off of. And now everything's a free-for-all.
Yep.
There's no structure. There's no lines to operate within.
Yeah, so, you know, it's a super interesting point that you're making, that it's almost an out for people to have their truth instead of having to deal with the truth.
I mean, here's a drastic example. If I go out and I say, man, I think hurting someone just because I feel like it is a good thing and it's good for society. I want to believe that if I go and physically harm someone, that I'm doing someone a favor. Right? This is just an example. Just because I believe that example to be a good thing doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. I shouldn't be going out and trying to physically harm someone just because I feel like it and believe it's a good thing. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
That's just not reality.
Yeah.
Right? And if I believe something to be morally just like that, just because I believe that's morally just doesn't mean that it's actually morally just. And I think that's why it's a dangerous thing to operate within, when you start to think my truth is my truth and reality is subjective. Because now what you do is you create an environment where people literally just do whatever they feel is right, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yep.
People have to learn to sit with their emotions regardless of how they feel. You're not always going to feel happy all the time. You're not always going to feel amazing. That's just the reality of how life works.
Yeah.
Every day is not perfect, and the sun is not up every single day. Sometimes it rains, sometimes there's a storm, sometimes there's lightning, and guess what? You got to live through it. And I feel like, man, that's just a whole other topic. But you know what I'm saying? I just think it's dangerous.
I'd go even farther and say life is so good here that we have told ourselves that it is important to be happy all the time.
Right.
And I actually think...
I think it's unrealistic.
And I think it's unhealthy.
Yeah.
You can't be happy all the time. Like, you're not supposed to be. Happy is supposed to be on one extreme of the emotional spectrum. You know, listen, I look at it like this, bringing it back to wrestling, because I want to ask you one more wrestling question.
Yeah.
But, you know, I cut from 171 to 140, and that sucked. I mean, that was a miserable cut, and you're so depleted you're so miserable. You make weight, and that first sip of orange juice or Gatorade or whatever your thing was is the best orange juice you've ever tasted in your entire life. It is the happiest. Like, somebody could be like, listen, man, you can either have this glass of orange juice or like you can date this supermodel or I'll give you $1 million. I want the orange juice because there is nothing that you want more when you are that dry, depleted, empty than that orange. The other stuff doesn't matter. It is visceral. You don't get that happiness in anything in your life unless you've paid the price for it. Contentment, comfort is not happiness. I have a big screen TV. I have a nice couch. I have a nice house. That is not happiness. Happiness comes from accomplishing something meaningful, to include having a great family.
I think, too, having a purpose also.
Yes.
Right? It gives life some meaning, but just because you have purpose doesn't mean every day is perfect.
That's right. In fact, if you have purpose, it rarely is perfect.
Right.
Because purpose presents problems.
Right. And you're doing something that's greater than you, right? It's more important than just and yeah, it's an interesting topic. But
yeah. We're both gonna just talk forever if I don't bring this to a close.
Yeah, bring us back.
I've got one wrestling question for you.
Okay.
What is the craziest situation that has come into your life from wrestling? It can be you were wrestling. It can be a wrestling trip. You've gone everywhere from Raleigh to Dagestan and back again on your career. What's the craziest moment in your career?
I'm trying to think of which one to share and what parts to share.
If you've got two, you're welcome to share two.
So, all right.
He's like, it's gonna be the goat.
There is no goat.
So, all right, there's one in Dagestan, Russia, that I was not a part of, but a group of the guys that were on tour were a part of, and they just shared when they got back from dinner. And then there's one in Kazakhstan that I was a part of, and so I'll share both. The one in Kazakhstan, it was me and a couple other guys who were out there, and we had gone out to this restaurant to eat, but we ended up staying out late. It's probably like 10, 11 in Kazakhstan, and we don't speak the language. We're American, we speak English, and for whatever reason, Americans only want to know one language when every other part of the world knows 2 to 3.
Yep.
Something we got to get better at. But I think there was not like an altercation, but there was a situation or a scenario where one of the wrestlers that was out with us at the restaurant had kind of gotten into it with some local people outside the restaurant, and it was starting to get heated to the point where we had to get this one individual to come back inside.
And it's tough. If you're in a country that ends with Stan, right?
Yeah.
They take stuff seriously.
Yeah, and very personally. And
it's not, you don't have casual.
Right. Yeah. And so they were upset, and they were voicing their concern about why they were upset. And one of the wrestlers that we were with just wasn't having it. He was like, we did nothing, blah, blah, blah. You're upset for no reason, et cetera, et cetera. Like, this is ridiculous. Just we're not able to come to a disagreement. Then you got the language barrier. So then our guy comes back inside. We're going to calm down. We're enjoying ourselves. We forget about it. The guys who are from Kazakhstan leave and come back with more people.
Of course. Yeah.
And they're waiting outside the restaurant for us to leave.
Yeah.
We have the restaurant owner essentially tells us what's going on and says, you guys are going to have to sneak out the back because of whatever. Like, he just didn't think that the situation was going to go well.
Yeah.
Granted, we're world-class wrestlers. We're probably not the guys you want to get in a physical altercation with.
But you don't know what they have.
But we don't know what they have, right? And we're thinking, like, at the very least, knives or something like that.
At the very least.
Or a goat.
Or a goat.
Yeah. Or an attack goat.
Yeah. So now there's this group of us sneaking through. We get a driver that they get to the back of the restaurant.
Yeah.
We are now sneaking through the kitchen, like going through whatever. Yeah. We open the door. We're all sprinting, stuffing into this car. And then we speed off past the guys who are waiting out front for us, who don't know we're sneaking through the back.
Yeah.
And we're going back to the hotel, and then that was it. But I'm just like, what? We're in freaking Kazakhstan. And like, out of all the situations to end up in, how did we end up in this? And I just thought it was like one of my crazier stories from just being overseas as like a training partner for World Championships.
Dude, I just find that like Americans don't travel enough to know danger.
Right.
I really believe that.
Yeah.
Like if you're in certain parts of the world, you just have to be like, my bad.
Yes.
Even if it's like, even if you're like, I could crush this guy. Right. He's got 43 friends.
Right.
Knives, guns, you know, and in some of these societies, honor, ego, whatever you want to call it, it's a big thing. It's not.
Yeah. It's culturally embedded.
Yeah, like somebody pushes me in a bar now. I'm like, you know, whatever. It's fine. You're in Kazakhstan.
Yeah. So that was one. And then another one was, I wasn't a part of this, but we were in Dagestan.
Another stand.
Yeah. They love wrestlers, though. They love American wrestlers. And so we got treated so well. I would actually like to go back just because we had such a great experience, and the training facility was awesome. They treated us so well. The people were so welcoming.
Yep.
Always wanted to take pictures and asking for like little gifts, and so we'd give them some of the USA gear or trade, like with some of the other wrestlers, and get some Russia gear, whatever it is. We obviously had some really good wrestlers on the trip, and so they wanted to take some of us out to eat. And I didn't end up going out to eat, but they took some of the guys out to eat, and I guess they got like connected with somebody from Habib Nurmagomedov's group, and I don't think he was there, but basically they get in this car and they take him to go meet these people, and then they switch from the car into like a bulletproof to like Toyota Land Cruiser. The guy's like taking a pistol off his hip, putting it on the center console. There's a car in front of the vehicle, a car in the back of the vehicle. They go sit at this restaurant. Everybody got out of the restaurant for them to go sit. They had two guys armed at the front door while everybody was eating. And this is like a big group of USA wrestlers sitting with this guy who just wanted to eat with everybody.
Yeah.
And they have a blast. And then they leave and come back. But one of the stories was one of my buddies was telling me that one of the wrestlers was messing with another one of my buddies. And he was basically just telling him like, hey, if you don't eat like all the food, they take it very disrespectfully. So like genuinely, if I were you, I'd make sure that you clean your plate. And so like already this guy's like nervous as all get out because there's freaking guys with two rifles sitting at the front door, the whole situation. So basically this one wrestler said he was stuffing his face the whole time, trying to make sure he ate everything, sweating his ass off, just like so uncomfortable, wouldn't stop eating until they left because he was so worried about pissing the guy off.
Yep.
And it was all made up. Like they didn't care at all. So it's just like, just kind of funny though. But that was kind of crazy. I'm just like, man. And I'm just sitting back in the hotel hanging out, and they tell me all this when they get back, and I'm just like, that's wild.
I love those moments.
That's crazy.
I love those moments.
Yeah,
my favorite thing to do is to set people up like that.
All right. He got set up.
All right. Sure. Rapid fire questions. My favorite, always the first one. Are you ready?
Ready.
What is the toughest animal that you think that you could defeat in hand-to-hand combat?
I saw on the internet this one guy like choked out a mountain lion. And I was like, all right, if he could do that, I could probably do that. I don't know.
Did you see the mountain lion though?
No.
It was like a juvenile. It was like 40 pounds.
Okay, so a 40-pound mountain lion. I can choke out a 40-pound mountain lion. Maybe not a full-grown one, but that's the first thing my mind goes to.
Okay, that was pretty reasonable. I just want you to know, because what we have learned is that our guests think that they could take out some significant animals.
Oh my gosh.
I
can definitely take out a goat. I know that much.
What kind of goat? Goats are tough. Did you see that? Did you see that goat that got hit by the snow leopard and dragged like 300 feet to the ground and was still alive?
That was crazy. The one that jumped off the mountain?
Yeah.
I did see that.
Yeah, I mean
That is true. Yeah.
The snow leopard killed it, but like at the bottom.
Yeah.
But the thing was still alive at the bottom. You know, I wouldn't be. I'd be dead. You know, I mean, you'd probably live, but
I don't know about that.
But you'd be
yeah.
hurting. You know,
For
so
sure.
I wouldn't sleep on a goat. You know, they're
So
tough.
we're talking like longhorn sheep, ibex.
All right. 40-pound mountain lion, though, I feel like that's a good,
Yeah.
solid answer. I think you might even be able to take a 55er.
All right, I'll take that.
You know.
I'll take that.
All right.
What about you?
Oh, flipping it around.
Oh.
Adolescent black bear.
Oh.
Adolescent. So it's
That's a good one.
So it's like
Because you still kind of look like a beast a little bit.
Yeah,
You know what I
like-
mean? Like it's still a bear.
yeah, it's still a bear,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's only like 150 pounds.
Right.
It doesn't have like the real claws yet.
Yeah,
you
and it
know?
doesn't really like
yeah,
have
and
that
it's-
mean streak to
yeah,
it yet.
and it doesn't really eat meat, so it's not coming at me
Yeah.
like that. And I
Nice.
could probably spook it a bit with some strikes. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah.
You know what the worst part of adolescent bear is? Mom. It's
No, they bail on them by then.
Oh, do they?
They bail on them by.
After
Yeah, yeah.
the
Oh
bailing.
no,
Oh,
no.
after-
I've thought this
okay.
through. I've thought this through. You notice I didn't say bear cub.
After the bailing.
Yeah, like they bail on them. They're on their own. They're about a $1.25. Like that's my window. All right, we are going to restart your life at 18 years old.
Okay.
We're going to wipe your memory of everything that you know, except for one thing. What's the one thing you're keeping?
What are you looking to me for?
I don't know. I just a crazy question.
Yeah.
Dang.
You know, wrestle with it a little bit.
I see what you did there.
It's one skill, right?
One skill. You get to keep one skill.
Okay, one skill. Okay, you said everything. I'm like, do I remember how to breathe?
Where,
Like,
yeah,
what's
yeah,
going
yeah. I
on
mean,
here?
So basically, like, you have amnesia. You have amnesia.
Okay.
Except you know your name,
Yep.
and you get to keep one skill, and the rest you're starting over from zero. What's the one skill you're keeping?
Cannot be wrestling.
I was just about to
You
say.
can't tell them
I
that.
had to take the easiest thing away.
Yeah, that would have been the easiest answer.
All right, we'll say other than wrestling, because Kelsey off screen has apparently hates the sport.
Cooking.
Cooking.
Yeah,
So you can cook.
sort of.
Well, we probably need.
No, I can kind of cook.
we need to
a
get
little
you to cook something if
Yeah.
that's the thing you're keeping. That's cool. All
bit.
right.
Yeah, I like to eat, man.
Okay.
You know?
All right. You are God of America for a day. You can
Jeez.
fundamentally change one thing that will permanently stay that way to make the country better. What is it?
People have to be involved in some sort of physical activity, like mandatory, extracurricular.
I like that.
Have to be.
I like that. If you were running for office,
Oh, geez.
what would be your number one platform item?
Something that incentivizes a commitment to the family. Kind of like we were talking about. I just think that's got a tremendous amount of value. Not necessarily something that forces people to stay in a situation they shouldn't be in, but some sort of policy that incentivizes an emphasis on creating and maintaining a strong family, healthy household. I think that just it would be beneficial across the board.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, team. Any other quick rapid fire questions for our guest?
Do you remember the goat's name?
Bobby.
What would you have said to that former self of yours that was kicking through a door frustrated that you just lost that wrestling match?
Just keep. I don't know. Just don't be a wuss.
Yeah.
I don't.
All right, my last question. I've been challenging Gwiz on Twitter for years
Nice.
to a wrestling
Gwiz
match.
has got some good Twitter activity.
He has
He got some
yet
good
to
Twitter
take me
activity.
up on that match. How badly do you think I will beat him when we finally wrestle?
Probably at least a major decision. I think you would bonus point Gwiz.
You think so? Should we do folk or free?
I think you would bonus point him either way. I think you get 8-point lead. Freestyle for sure. He's kind of big,
he is
very bearish.
Yeah, he is.
so he's easy to roll. You know what I mean? So I think you could get him to expose a couple times. Folk folk style. I just don't see him getting him up off the bottom. I think.
I'd just ride him
Torch him
down,
on
right? He
top.
probably
Yeah.
couldn't get
No.
up from this
Yeah.
kind of heat.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially
Well,
if you can take like an adolescent bear down.
Yeah.
I don't think you have a problem with Gwiz.
I think we're so aligned on this.
Right.
I'm glad we closed on
Gwiz
that
himself
note.
is kind of like an adolescent bear. His, like just left the group on his own.
Yep.
Out in New York now.
Yeah, I know.
So it'd be a good preliminary bear match for him.
Yeah, he would actually. I think so. I think he would. Yeah, bonus point at least.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, of course.
Mike Macchiavello, great guest. Thanks so much for coming on the program. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, man.